You're watching the Rollerson Broadcasting Network.
Rollerson Broadcasting presents.
My name is Mary Williams, and on behalf of Leon Rollerson Productions, I would like to introduce to you our special guest today, Mr. Bruce Benjamin, a freelance artist. How are you, Bruce?
Fantastic.
Well, welcome to the show today, and we want to talk a little bit about this wonderful artwork displayed behind us. Tell me, you are a freelance artist,
Yes, ma'am.
and do you paint by commission only? How can we contact you to perhaps have some of this art displayed or perhaps have a portrait made?
Well, basically, well, you can just reach me at my cell. It's area code 918-951-8495.
8495?
8495.
Great, great. I know you're going to get lots of calls, but basically we want to learn a little bit about you and some of this wonderful artwork. And I know the curious question is, how long have you been painting?
Woo! I've been painting for quite a while. I've been painting over, well, basically since I've been about third grade, so that's about 10 years old.
Well, tell us a little bit about some of your artwork. I know we may not be able to talk about each piece, but particularly your biblical art and then your portraits. Tell us a little bit about what inspired you and perhaps what each painting means to you.
Okay. Well, basically, like Muhammad Ali, when I look at Muhammad Ali and you look at his style, you look at his character, it's just something that in black history, and you look at what he set forth for everybody, and, he is the greatest, so when you look at boxers, and I admire boxers, so he's one of the greatest, so that's what inspired me to do Muhammad Ali,
And your biblical art?
My biblical art is, well, I am biblical. I loved, basically when I saw these pictures here, I had an old Bible. And it's rare that you see biblical artwork. It's so graphic. Okay, and it was in ink drawings, and I loved them. And I thought I would just like to just bring it to life with some color. So that's what inspired me to do these here. And I wouldn't mind also making those into coloring books.
Oh,
so
wonderful.
when you just have a cover and give you an idea how to put your colors together and so forth, but have a coloring book in biblical.
Well, tell me, this depiction may be familiar with a lot of biblical scholars or Sunday school students, but tell us a little bit about this one.
Oh, Abraham and Isaac.
Okay.
I call that one the test of faith.
Oh.
Okay. So basically what Abraham and Isaac, that was his pride and joy, and for God to ask him to sacrifice Isaac, it was like almost out of the question. But, who was he to question God's request? So he put his faith in God's hands, and that's what that's about right there. And God brought the lamb.
Well, as I'm looking at your artwork, which is very, very nice, what inspired you, and do you have an icon? I can think of, for me, an artist at the turn of the century who was African American, Henry Tanner, who had to actually go overseas to have the freedom to paint as he wanted to. You have that freedom, so what inspires you? Who is your icon? And I guess a third question would be, what would you say to aspiring young artists?
Well, follow your heart. If that's what you love, you know what I'm saying? Who's to say not do it? Okay. Who inspired me basically was my brother, Chris. He's a fantastic artist. And as I got off into depth in my artwork, I loved Nagel. I love Norman Rockwell. I love the way he pictured people, you know, and family, and I love that, you know, and that's why I really enjoy doing portraits. You know, it just captures the character of the person.
So as you're painting, you're basically, although you may have an image in front of you, you're following your heart as to what you feel while you're painting about them. Do you have a sense of emotion about the portraits that you paint? Maybe do you try and bring out, as I'm looking at Muhammad Ali, as a boxer, I can feel the gruel behind that punch, which I think is really a good sign of a good artist. But
Thank you.
What has been your, I guess, most memorable art piece?
Right now, all of us my memorable art piece, but I have one particular one is Sammy Davis. I do not have it here with me right now. It is Missing in Action. So I love it. And what inspires me to do this, I mean, when I'm drawing a portrait and I'm looking at it, to me, it gives me that where I'm trying to, knowing this person, you know, I might not know him that well, but when I look into the eyes of my portraits and feel that vibe and that spirit, you know, that's what I try to put off into my artwork, you know, and try to capture that character, you know. That's why a lot of times I work from photographs. When you have people sit, you know, you can do a good job, but you have to be one of them great artists to really catch that character, because your character changes so often when you sit and you're looking, you know. But when you have a still life, it goes nowhere and it's right there, and that character don't move. So you have that opportunity to capture that character within that person, you know, and that's what I try to do.
Great. Well, how long have you been painting?
Since '91. Well, this is Prisma pencil. I've been doing that since 1990.
1990.
I went to Platt College,
Okay.
and a young man named Dane Dudley, matter of fact, introduced me to the Prisma pencil. See, all these are pencils.
Okay.
And it's Prisma artwork. And when he introduced me to the Prisma pencil, I was kind of leery, scared, because you know how, you know, when you draw, you don't like to get draw real light, you know what I'm saying, where it looks good. But he taught me when you can put that deep color, get off into the character of the detailing, is what he taught me with these pencils. And when he showed me that, it just opened my eyes up to a whole different world of art.
Well, this is most interesting, and I know that most artwork has a point of perspective where the artist, I believe, really desires the viewers to kind of key in on. So as I look at this particular art piece, what would be the point of perspective? What would you like for them to really focus on?
On this piece, well, what I focus on, I can tell you what I focus on, you know, because if someone else look at it, they have their own perspective. Okay. And what I focus on in this particular picture is the two young men right here where he's casting out the demons. So basically, you're looking at how the demons are fleeing out of their body. You know, that's what caught my attention.
Okay.
And the detailing of the two young men. And you got the swine as they being cast in the sea, you know. But this is what captures me. Okay, that's what I look at because of the graphics.
And looking at the art, one can't help but notice that Jesus is portrayed as not so much as an African, but a man of color.
Right.
And often, especially through the 60s, one of the main cries about what was considered the European perspective on Christianity was that it all consisted of the European look. And this adds a new genre to biblical art. And I've always asked, where are the artists? Because you have painters like Michelangelo and so many others. They painted by inspiration. And there's always the artistic license that you can paint based on what inspires you and still tell the same story as someone else. So I'm very impressed with this, because to have biblical art that also portrays the color perspective means a lot to me and to my posterity. And I'm hoping, I used to have what they would call a Children of Color Bible, the Heritage Bible. Have you ever thought about doing artwork for maybe biblical productions? You mentioned earlier about a coloring book.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Well, the coloring book is really just giving back, to beginners that that you can have in your churches. Okay, and you have that variety. But then again, they might not have that artistic to draw, but they have that artistic skills to color, So maybe through my pictures, biblical pictures in the Bible, it can bring them closer, because they're going to be asking questions. The curious mind, well, what is this picture? What does it stand for? And it's a good way to introduce them to God, because that's where I get my blessings from. That's where I get my skills from, So why not give back?
Well, this has been most enjoyable, and I also want to say thank you for using your gift. We want to also recognize Leon Rollerson for recognizing your gift and inviting you
I appreciate
onto the show. One statement that I would like to make is to continue, please, don't stop. I remember as I took arts and humanities in school, I learned that many painters, especially when it came to biblical art, were commissioned by kings, by dignitaries, and they would actually lose their life if the painting was not what the king really wanted. So you don't paint under that type of pressure these days.
No.
But you will take commission painting, requests by
ma'am.
commission. And if someone wants to contact you again, can you repeat that number?
Area code 918-951-8495.
Well, Bruce, this has been a delight, and I want to thank you, audience, once again for tuning in to Leon Rollerson Productions. And stay tuned, we have so much more ahead of us. Thank you so much.
Hello and welcome to the Leon Rollerson Show. When I say that our guest is a very fascinating man, I mean he is a very fascinating man. He's had a wonderful career in broadcasting, journalism, and editing. My name is Wanda Thomas, and this is Mr. Eddie L. Madison. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well, tell me a little bit about where you began, Mr. Madison, in editing and journalism and broadcasting.
Well, actually, I started as a newsboy for the Oklahoma Eagle when it was a nickel. And as you know now, it's 50 cents and worth it.
Yes, it is worth it.
Every penny.
It is worth every penny of it. And you started there, and you said that you, after you worked your way up to.
Well, after I finished high school at Booker T. Washington, I went away to journalism school at Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri. It was the only institution of higher learning that trained African Americans then.
Wow.
And subsequently, this is jumping the gun, but after 6 years of working in Chicago, I started in Chicago with the Defender after I left the Eagle.
Okay.
After getting my master's degree.
Okay.
I worked at the Chicago Defender, the Associated Negro Press, and then the Tribune, the Chicago Tribune. And then I moved to Washington, where I worked for the U.S. Department of Commerce, the Evening Star Broadcasting Company, which was also known as the Washington Star Station Group, and then the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Well, you told me that you had all through this time you had aspirations of being a broadcaster, but you had a career change during this time due to the degree that you had in community service.
No.
Oh,
I got an award in community service.
Okay.
So I got pulled out of television public affairs and thrust into corporate management
Okay.
because a problem the company had with its flagship television station in Washington, Channel 7.
Okay. And here you met a guy that you told me that you were very, very proud to be introduced to, Mr. Charles.
Well, Charles Gibson, who is now ABC's evening anchor,
Okay.
was an intern at Channel 7 in Washington.
Okay.
And I got to know him, and then he later became a Washington correspondent. Then he became co-anchor of the Good Morning America program, and now he's doing the evening news.
Absolutely.
So I'm very proud of the reason I say I'm so fond of him. He was very helpful to me when during the 7 years that I was at Lincoln University. Through his arrangement, I was able to have 8 of my students and the president of the university and myself open up a segment of Good Morning America one morning. And then when Gibson couldn't speak at an awards banquet in Missouri, he taped something along with his then co-host Joan London and Spencer Christian, who was the weatherman at the time, and that was played at our awards banquet.
Oh,
So he was very helpful. He's as nice in person as he appears to be on camera, and I'm always glad to be able to say something nice about someone.
And another person that you said that you were really during your career you really enjoyed interviewing and being around was Dr.
Martin Luther King Jr.
Tell me a little bit about him.
Well, he was a fraternity brother. I got to know him, not just someone in the news, but I got to interview him, and then I was on the dais with him at least once during one of our awards banquets. And the amazing thing about Dr. King is all he had to know was when he was supposed to appear on the program. And he had no notes, no manuscript, anything. And he would get up to the podium and run down statistics,
Wow.
Quote the Bible, quote literature, whatever happened to fit into his message. And afterward, we said, Brother King, how do you do all of this? And he just made no big thing out of it.
He was just a brilliant, brilliant man, wasn't he?
And my other connection with Dr. King, well, there were 2 others. Because I was manager of community services for this company, I was able to get the public service company, PEPCO, in the Washington, D.C. area, to put up $50,000 so we could air the documentary from Montgomery to Memphis without commercial interruption.
Wow.
And I did a public service announcement with Mrs. King at the time, one with the then mayor of Washington, and one with Walter Fauntleroy, who was the person who directed the March on Washington in 1963. And he later became a delegate to the District of Columbia. You know, they still don't have the vote in Washington, D.C. And then I was on the initial committee that originated the idea to have this national memorial to Dr. King.
Yeah.
So I've been involved somehow or another, never knowing that I would, in Dr. King's life when he was doing all of these wonderful things in the civil rights movement, and then after his untimely death.
We never know why our lives are led in a certain direction until things like this, like you say, do happen. There's another gentleman that you said was from Tulsa that you had the privilege of knowing and being able to.
Well, I got to introduce him at one of our scholarship banquets. He is also a member of this fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha.
Okay.
And I got to introduce Dr. Franklin at one of these awards banquets. I told the brothers I'll get him as speaker provided I get to introduce him.
All right. So there are some perks in it.
But I think I was chapter president anyway.
So you were going to get to do it anyway. How wonderful, how wonderful. Sounds like you have led an exciting life and that you've enjoyed every moment of being in the business that you're doing. If for all of the young people out there, you know, because you paved the way for a lot of young people. You said your mom even said you were born, what, 30 years too soon?
30 years too soon.
30 years too soon. But what would you advise young people to do if they were going to get started in this business?
To have a passion for it. But I say that for any career. If you have a passion for what you do, it's not like work. Because see, when I started working for a daily newspaper like the Chicago Tribune, I had to be there on Sundays, on holidays. It was a daily newspaper.
Yeah.
And say, well, it's Christmas, guys. So.
Yeah, things are happening on Christmas. Yeah. And in the news business, something is happening every day.
Right.
You're right, yeah.
And the other highlight that I told you about in our little discussion before we went on the air is I covered the first summit meeting of the independent African states in Monrovia, Liberia.
Wow.
This is while I was working for the Associated Negro Press before I went to the Tribune. And I interviewed 17 heads of state, including Emperor Haile Selassie. Wow. I had to use an interpreter in some instances.
What was that like? I mean, did you just sit down at a formal meeting, or were you?
Well, they had press briefings.
Okay.
And this conference lasted about 5 days, but this meeting paved the way for the Organization of African Unity, the OAU, which is now called the African Union.
Wow. So,
interviewing Dr. King and covering that African conference are two of the highlights of my career. It goes without saying.
That is wonderful. And so how did you wind up coming back to Tulsa?
Well, I left Washington after nearly 30 years, and I had been asked to serve as head of the journalism and broadcasting department at Lincoln, my undergraduate alma mater, 3 times, and I kept turning them down. I wasn't ready to take a cut in pay.
And slow down.
I had to put 3 youngsters through college, you know.
Yeah, slow your lifestyle all the way down.
So I accepted their offer, never knowing that someday I would be head of the department that awarded me my bachelor's degree. Wow. And it was quite a challenge. I see why some people find teaching so fulfilling. Yeah. Because, you know, in some cases, had it not been for you, something you said or did, that person may not have received his or her degree. Wow. And one of my students, Lincoln University is predominantly white now. It's a historically black school. But one of my students submitted my name for inclusion in the book America's Most Outstanding Teachers. Well, and I never dreamed that, the guy who didn't want to go into education.
You were going to be a broadcaster, not a teacher.
So I've received a number of honors through the years. I mean, who's who in the East, America, the world. And I was, last year, selected by the Tulsa Association of Black Journalists for its Lifetime Achievement Award. Wow. So I've been pleased. When you ask me, if I chose the right career. I'm sure I did.
Yes.
If I had it to do all over again, there aren't too many changes. There's one congressman I wouldn't work for in Washington.
Well, we
But
won't-
that's another story.
That's a whole other story.
That's not even in my resume.
Well, but I tell you what, a lot of the ones that you did probably way outnumber the one that didn't. But I tell you, it is wonderful having you. And, you know, to have lived a career like that, you know, it had to have been exciting and fascinating. And it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. So this is Wanda Thomas, and I'm with Mr. Eddie Madison, and I tell you, we have had a great time on the show, and we welcome you to stay tuned, and we will be right back here on the Leon Rollerson Show.